Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Healing the Spirit. I am so excited that you are here today because I am sharing a very special conversation with none other than my astrology students. So as some of you may know, Britton LaRue, my dear friend, my collaborator, and one of my astrology teachers, and we are creating a new offering, which is a year-long astrology learning container, and it's called Astrology as Praxis. You can check out our course page if you are interested. I think it's going to be such a great experience. We've been talking about it for the past few episodes of Healing the Spirit. I believe episode 18 and 19, we talked about different ways into thinking about astrology as praxis. And a little bit of a backstory is that last year, Britton and I collaborated on her course, which is called Charting Your Course, a 7-month astrology learning container. And we had the most magical humans come join us in that container. It was an experience like no other. And if you listen to some of our previous episodes, you know that Charting Your Course is now composted. We are no longer running Charting Your Course, and we are really using our experience from running Charting Your Course together as a foundation, as a building block for creating astrology as praxis. And yeah, it was just such an incredible experience having these humans learn with us because they are so brilliant, they're so wise, and they're so insightful, and they really taught Britton and me what it means to create a learning space where everybody is holding each other. We are not interested as facilitators in building an astrology learning container where you cannot bring your whole self. So really, even from Charting Your Course last year, we have been encouraging people to bring in the weird, the gnarly, the strange, the crazy materials of their own lives into learning astrology, because we found that bringing our whole self and bringing our entire spectrum of human experience into learning astrology is such a powerful way to learn. And also, something that we discovered was that astrology is not just a language or a system that is useful for personal healing, but that astrology is also deeply impactful when used in community, because the way that we understand each archetype is obviously filtered through our own lenses as human beings. But when we're in community, we can allow this collective intelligence to begin emerging. I don't know if any of you listened to some of the earlier episodes, but there was an episode that I did earlier with some people that I learned astrology with, from Sabrina Monarch's container. So Sabrina is also another one of my teachers. And that conversation was just so electric. You can see that, when we use astrology as a social language, a sort of intelligence begin to emerge. And there's just something so exciting and so electrifying about bringing our whole self into this altar, into this container, into this wisdom tradition. And so last year's Charting Your Course was such an important learning experience for me because that was my first time teaching astrology to alive human beings that are not myself. And obviously, I have been learning astrology for some time, and I have my own very specific way of learning astrology, which, if you know me, I am a Gemini moon, and it's a very specific way of learning. I just basically devoured everything, and sometimes I devoured a little bit of different traditions, and I exposed myself to different teachers. I put myself in different learning containers. I speak to different people. I learn by this way of really kind of almost what I call like a ping pong learning experience. But last year's experience really taught me that it wasn't just me or Britain that were facilitating this container, but that everybody within that container stepped up and started teaching each other, which was just such a cool experience to witness. And so I really learned a lot about what it means to, sequence different learning materials and to really listen to how different people learn, and that everybody has their own preferred method of learning, and also their own preferred rate of learning, right? In terms of like how quickly they like to learn certain things. So Britton and I are taking all of that experience into this new offering, Astrology as Praxis, that we're creating. And the focus of this conversation is really to celebrate these incredible humans who trusted me and Britton to be part of their astrological learning journey. And also to reflect on what it means to be learning astrology within a community for them, and how that experience has impacted them on a personal level outside of being in this container and outside of being within this community. I absolutely adore this conversation. Like I said, I thought it was electric, it was incredible, and I could not have been more grateful or more proud of these very magical humans and their dedication to learning this magical language of the cosmos. Also, as a side note, we discussed the Magician's Table, which is another course that Britton runs. And just to give you a little bit of a background, the Magician's Table is really a container that is created specifically by Britton for emerging readers. So if you are an emerging tarot reader or astrologer or intuitive reader, the Magician's Table is really an experience designed to help you step into your readership, both on an external and an internal level. So, yeah, without further ado, here's our conversation, and I hope you really enjoy this reflection on what it means to learn astrology within a community. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Britton and I are so excited to talk to you. You all were part of charting your course this past year, the 2021 cohort. And this year, even though we're not doing charting your course, we thought that something that Britton and I have been talking a lot about since charting your course ended is how learning astrology in community seems to have a certain kind of power or pizzazz to it that is maybe not always accessible or available when you're learning astrology by yourself, just with the books. And also, honestly, like, we thought of you guys a lot. We think about you guys all the time, literally, because I feel like it's not just that we were the facilitators, but that you showing up really brought something to the table, and it was really cool to kind of watch you guys work with each other, learn with each other, and grow together. So I'm super excited to have this conversation today. This is really going to be a reunion, and to start off, maybe we can introduce ourselves. Yeah? I kind of want to hear maybe from Jacqueline first.
All right. Hello, my name is Jacqueline. I am a Pisces Sun, Scorpio Moon, Virgo Rising, and I'm happy to be here today.
Yeah. Where are you calling from, Jacqueline?
Oh, yes. I am calling in from San Antonio, Texas, and you can find me on Instagram at the Peach Bungalow.
Yay. And we'll have all of your links below and a little bit of a bio if you guys want to share it. And then maybe John.
Hey, everybody. My name is John. My pronouns are he, him, and my big three include my sun in Gemini, my moon is in Taurus, and I am a Leo rising. I'm calling in from Redmond, Washington, the Seattle area, greater Seattle area, because I'm on vacation. Normally, I live in Fresno, California, but I'm visiting my sister, and it's been a really nice visit. Finally, the Pacific Northwest is cooling down. You can find me, on Instagram at the.chariot. You just spell chariot with a Y. And I think you're going to post that as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Thanks for being here during your vacation. Amy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy. I'm a Cancer Sun, Libra Moon, Leo Rising as well as John. I'm calling from Boulder, Colorado. I'm super happy to see you guys again.
Yay. Thank you, Amy. Happy to see you. Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm calling from Little Cranberry Island, Maine, the land of the Wabanaki people. I am a Taurus rising, Taurus moon, and Aquarius sun. And I think I covered the bases. Excited to hang out with you guys.
Yeah, excited to be here too. Thanks, Mary. Bridget.
Hi, I'm Bridget. So happy to be here today. It's super exciting to see you all. I am a Scorpio sun, Capricorn moon, and Aries rising. I'm zooming in from suburban New York City, and this was the highlight of my week, honestly. So I could not be happier to be here.
It's awesome. Thanks, Bridget. And of course, we have Britton too. Do you want to say hi, Britton?
Hi, everyone. Britton LaRue from Dallas, Texas here. I'm an Aries rising like Bridget. And like Bridget, I also have a Capricorn moon, and I am a Pisces sun, born on the same day of March as Jonathan Coe.
Yes. As you can see, there's a lot of pinging already. I love it. So our conversation today is really centered around, or at least the intention for it is to talk about the experience of learning astrology within community. And I'm curious to hear from any of you about what you've learned about yourself, about other people, about the world through learning astrology, especially within this community last year with me and Britton.
I had no real conception of astrology before the pandemic set upon us. And, I was always aware of my sun sign, and I was kind of fascinated with Gemini and really kind of proud of my Gemini. I didn't know much about it, but that was me growing up. And then I had learned Tarot back in the early 90s. And during the pandemic, it became important for me to begin to explore some form of spiritual, intuitive path towards self-knowledge, but also a greater sense of the world and my role in it, what my relationship is to larger groups of people. And as I was kind of getting back into Tarot more seriously, I began exploring social media, which I hadn't really done before. I hadn't looked at Tarot or any of these intuitive arts through social media. And I found that just about everybody who had some account that was related to Tarot was also combining that with astrology. And so I thought, okay, well, I guess I need to like explore astrology a little bit. And I began doing some sort of nosing around and, looking at YouTube videos, listening to podcasts. And I found Moon to Moon, and that was a really useful source for me. I began taking baths during the COVID pandemic. And so I would turn it on while I was in the bath and I would listen to it. And it was sort of a perfect setting for that. But I really enjoyed Britton's approach to astrology. So when charting your course became an offering, a possibility, for its second iteration, I decided, well, I need to really learn more about astrology. I was still struggling at that point with ideas of belief and, do I believe in it? Is it real? Is it scientific? Is it whatever? But I quickly learned through the course that those things are much less important than ideas around, is astrology useful? Can it help you? Is it fun? Those became kind of the primary questions I had when I sort of started thinking about astrology writ large. So anyway, I've learned a lot about charting your course. And I have to say, I'm super happy that I took that class. I'd taken a class in which I was watching pre-recorded videos before. I'd taken that kind of class, and there was no sense of community. And so I was just kind of like doing that whole, on my own, learning online sort of thing, which has its value. But charting your course was an opportunity for me to learn with other people. And I learned once again, or it hit home to me, how important it is for me to do that kind of learning activity with other people who are also curious, eager to learn more about themselves, but to do so in a setting in which we can share that information with one another, help one another with questions we had about what astrology means for us personally. So my experience with charting your course was great. It was terrific. It was a lovely combination of doing your homework and then showing up and having conversations with people and comparing notes and just having a lovely time while you're going at it. So, and fun became a really central feature of that experience. So I hope that answered the question, but that's what came to mind when you asked it.
Thank you, John. That's lovely. I really like what you said about wanting to feel into this greater sense of the world. I feel like a lot of us experienced that, and probably a lot of us bonded over the fact that we were all trying to find that together alongside each other within this course. Yeah.
I would love to jump in if I could.
Of course.
Perfect. As I reflected back on this question, which is very thoughtful, I found that I learned and I unlearned. The unlearning was almost as valuable as the learning within the container. My historic way of thinking, and still very much habitual way of thinking, is that that knowledge is the answer. That I can just dive right in and go down this spiral and dark hole and just do it all by myself. Maybe take one other person with me, because that's very much how I learn, is like hearing from another person. And so, the idea of being community is very scary. I don't mean like community. I mean like a small group setting where you're going to be vulnerable and going to be seen. And so what I learned throughout the 7 months together was that I actually needed to live. I needed to take what I could, just take the one nugget and then see how it applied in my everyday life and figure out situations where it worked and it didn't work. And that was a big unlearning for me, because I like to compartmentalize my life. Like, here's what class is, here's what my life is, they shall never meet, and astrology does not lend itself to that in my experience. My experience is that the more I apply astrology to my everyday living, the more connected I feel to my everyday living. And that it's beautiful and a little painful and fun and scary, you know, and all the things. And so to unlearn that, like, knowledge is not always the answer, you know, and that the application is so powerful, and to see other people, you know, doing it in their direct experience was just, you know, mind-blowing, honestly. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there was a lot about how we found ways to contextualize these terms, like in even just thinking about something John said, where I'm like, oh, Taurus moon, like we have that in common. Or like the little clubs that would happen of like, oh, the Leo risings or Aries, you know, and that in other contexts, it seems sort of like dismissive or you're labeling people, but it was just like oh, we share that. And I see this in you. And that's reflecting back these parts of me that, I don't know, it was so memorable to learn in that way, because we had, as always, one of my many favorite Britain phrases, but the inventory of the present moment, you know, like, oh, how's this going for you guys? I wonder about like this particular placement or this particular aspect. And that we were able to just, we all really took turns, it seemed, like having those times where I was like, oh, there's a few placements that it's really lit up. And then the next week or the next month, it might be something totally different. And when I think back to not just like for my personal learning about my chart, it was really, really helpful for how open people were to share. And while Bridget was talking, I was just reminded of our last meetup and how I didn't expect it to be so emotional to say goodbye to our class, because you realize like, oh shit, we've really shared a lot of personal things after 7 months of checking in and having those weekly how do we do it, like the chart of the moment, you know? So there's a lot there. Love it.
Yeah, I want to second that. And I was also going to share how it's just so great to learn astrology, like with real data and like real people who you are comfortable with and who also share the language of astrology with you. So I joined Charting Your course pretty, like, I would say very familiar with the language of astrology, but I just love the containers that Britton and Jonathan create. So I truly joined it for like the community aspect of the course. And I think for me, what's been so helpful learning astrology and really being able to apply it as like true information and not just trying to memorize is being able to learn about moon signs and then look at the people in your life and then, you know, kind of see, oh, so that is how like a Taurus moon reacts to something. That's how a Scorpio moon and so on. And so being able to, you know, have all these charts of people accessible to you and then being able to like learn from them in real time is like so helpful. It's honestly, it's so much more impactful for learning than like having flashcards of like what all the moon signs mean. Like to be able to have the real world application is so important.
I think like what John was saying about adding the fun in there too. I mean, just all of it together. Like there was a lot of emotion, but there was also the fun and like learning about ourselves as well as adding the fun. It makes it such a just a meaningful experience, like it makes us feel so close to each other, I felt like. And also makes us, I felt, learn a lot more easily, you know? Yeah, I felt like I learned a lot about all of the things, but also a lot about myself.
Yeah. I love that, Amy. I feel like something that you were bringing up is this idea that I've been thinking a lot about, which is astrology as a social lubricant. Because I think what's special about astrology is because it's a symbolic language, there's a way in which, you know, being a Leo rising for you will mean very different things than what it means to John, being a Leo rising, right? And or being an Aries rising for Britton and Bridget. Like that might have very, very different implication. And in a way, it almost it invites in curiosity rather than stereotyping. Or at least we have the agency as a community to explore it as a really exciting entry point where we can kind of begin to get to know each other. Something that that Jacqueline was bringing into the conversation was this idea of the moon signs, and that makes me think about nourishment and the cultivation of different ways to nourish ourselves and nourish others. And I'm curious if there's something that in the experience of learning astrology with others within a container, do you feel like you gain any skills or any knowledge around how to care for yourself and how to care for others?
For me, the moon sign has been incredibly important. It's only been maybe a year and a half or so that I've even known what my moon sign and my rising sign were. But as someone who is a Gemini sun and a Leo rising, which means lots of kind of energy, I learned, like I do have a lot of energy and it can get pretty scattered. I have really found refuge in my Taurus moon. Like it's become one of my favorite placements, and it's my go-to for it's time to kind of, get some serenity. Let's figure out, what's going on with the moon, my moon, or the sort of in the sky transiting moon. An example of that I just was looking at today. I've had a hard time sleeping the last few nights, and I think it's because I've been traveling. I've been in different beds that are different from my own. I also think, this latest Mars conjunct Uranus conjunct with the North Node is not soothing us to sleep with any kind of lullabies. But very early this morning, I had a transit of the moon, which was currently in Libra. I think it still is. Conjunct my Mars in Libra. And so I was reflecting on that this morning when I thought, once again, I'm staying up until 2 a.m. and I'm having a hard time going to sleep. And I thought, well, that kind of makes sense, because Mars is there kind of like poking away at my moon. My moon is getting activated rather than in some place of solid rest or tranquility. And so knowing that that's going on, it's just useful for me to be able to kind of say, okay, well, maybe I need to do a little bit more around sleep hygiene or prepare myself a little bit better for, and it's just a small instance, right? I mean, it's just like when you go to sleep, but that's meaningful. We all need to sleep. We need to have good sleep. And astrology gives me that little mini framework to work with to say, okay, well, here's what's going on. And, maybe I need to care for my body or care for my sleep habits in particular ways. And I've got this other thing kind of pinging away. My natal Mars is sort of like kind of poking at my moon a little bit too. So I don't know, that just feels important. And in terms of how I care for others, it's a huge deal. My relationship, I'm in a 26-year relationship, so we know each other pretty well. We've been in this long-term relationship, but I'm much more, I'm often looking to say my seventh house, right? The house where that kind of governs personal relationships that are contractual in some way, either explicitly or implicitly, committed partnerships. And so I'll look at that to kind of like see what's happening over there. And how can I use that as a way to find a skill or a tool to strengthen, improve, patch up, whatever it is, the relationship that I have. So those are things that come to mind. I've just found it very useful, both personally and when I'm interacting with others. I think I would have more to say also about my relationship to community and astrology, but I want to stop there for now.
I just want to hop in and say that, John, witnessing your process of loving your moon, caretaking your moon, listening to your moon, then this is how I think we learn a community. It like turned me inward to think about how could I care for my moon in such a way? Like, especially it's interesting to think about how a Taurus moon is what we call exalted, right, in astrology, and my own moon, is in detriment. It's interesting to think for me then about how we can learn caretaking skills from witnessing different folks who have different placements from us be in process with their own placements, and then try things out, like get experimental with new ways of self-care and new ways of self-knowing from learning with one another.
Because it brings the personal and the communal together, right? When we're in charting your course, and when I learned that Mary, who's on this call, has a Taurus moon, and we still do this, right? I'm often posting something in an Instagram story or on social media, something, and I'll tag Mary because I know that, like, as a Taurus moon, she might be interested in this little meme or whatever it is, but it's so helpful to hear about how others relate to that placement, which is also going to be different from your own, but what they're doing in response to that placement in order to take care of themselves, in order to caretake themselves. So it doesn't just become self-care, it's actually communal care, because you're helping each other care for ourselves.
Yeah, John, I love that, because it's so true that whenever, like, if we circle back in the month and it's like, oh, it's a Taurus moon again, I'm like, wonder what John's up to. How's he doing? How's this affecting you? And that, like, it's the littlest thing, but I think it's also such a reminder, like, we're not alone. We're never, like, we're all experiencing it, but then some people you're like, oh, they're getting it in ways that maybe it's not always so intense, but sometimes it's just nice to hear you're not crazy and you have something you can blame it on too. Or maybe you are crazy and you have something to blame it on.
Yeah. Yeah. This idea of my, your, ourselves is really interesting, because when Britton and I were creating the course page for Astrology as Praxis, we did have that conversation around, is this my voice, or is this your voice, or is this our voice, or is this the voice of the container, and even sitting here with all of you, what I'm sensing is that is so profound, is that the body remembers. It's like when we are all here together again, there was almost like a sensation that came up in my body that I'm like, ooh, I haven't felt like this for some time, and it's because of these people. And it's almost like, yeah, my body remembers what it's like to be with all of you. And the way in which we also, I think, this is something I saw during charting your course, where people so beautifully co-regulate each other. Like, just by us using the language of astrology, it's almost like there's a soothing quality to it. And also, something that I've been, and I don't know if any of you might want to speak to this, but I think what's genius about astrology is that in some ways, we as humans are always projecting, right? But astrology is kind of this really elaborate game of projection. It's like we're projecting all of these different materials onto the chart, and then we somehow are able to get to our answer just by using kind of a roundabout way of, like, projecting different things onto the chart. And it's like, maybe what comes to mind is how you, John, and Mary have the same moon sign, and it's like you both project different things onto it. But somehow you can still meet in the middle, and you can find kind of a way of being with yourself through witnessing each other.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think the gift of astrology is that it really gives us compassion for ourselves and our chart and also for others. And so like the beauty is being able to learn about your chart through the eyes of other people. Because I think when you're learning alone, it's really like yourself so deeply that it's really easy for you to view your placements as like pain points or create a narrative that it's like a difficult, something about you that's difficult. And whenever we, during our weekly meetups, we had the option to have our chart pulled up and looked at by other members in the group. And I think that is so transformative to like, you can share about what's going on for your week, and maybe someone will view like your Mercury sign in a completely different way than you've ever thought about it. And it gives you like this really new way to like get into your chart and learn about yourself. And I think that is so important for the community aspect of learning astrology. And then I think it also in turn gives you so much knowledge to bring that compassion out to the people in your life, because I like to say, like, with our charts, it's like, of course you are the way that you are. Like, you have your Mars in Leo, like, you can't help it. And maybe like you feel like you're too big, but it's like, no, you have Mars in Leo. Like, you can't help it. It's just who you are. Like, it's no big deal. And for us to like really deeply learn our chart placements, that it gives us, just this knowing about who we are. And it's like my Mercury is in Pisces in my 7th house. Like, every conversation I have to like talk about other people when I'm sharing a story. And like, I just am a very like soft, non-direct communicator. Like, that's just who I am. And to try to communicate the way that an Aries Mercury does, it would be going against who I am. So I think it's just like really beautiful to learn about yourself, with other people.
Definitely. I would just add that, it's such a safe place, the community that's coalesced, here, and in charting your course and the other containers I've been in with y'all. I just think that, it kind of just arrests the ego in a lot of ways to really unpack how many tools are available through astrology. It's so empowering to look at your chart or other people's charts and feel this like deep connection, to the collective, and to also know that it's reflected back to you. Speaking of Mercury, Jacqueline made me think of, Mariola said something in class that really made me completely 180 with my, I have Mars conjunct Mercury, and honestly, I don't know, the softening that had been required for me to make this kind of change and transition that she made, because I just thought of it as like, you're a direct communicator. You just, say it like it is. And it's always going to be very difficult. People are going to, hate what your message is, those types of messaging over and over. And she just said something to the extent of people with that placement have a deep level for honesty. And like, it was like unlocked, I was like, oh, I didn't even know I had a lock on this, like somebody unlocked it and I didn't even know it was there. And it's so meaningful to be, and empowering to say that that's, a gift that I might have or somebody else might have, and to see those revelations happen repeatedly every week is just so inspirational. And I think, makes the community so special. So thank you.
I also want to add something that you made me think, Bridget, is that, learning astrology with the community aspect instead of maybe doing like a 1-hour one-on-one reading from an astrologer to learn about yourself is like the slow drip of information, so that you're like slowly unpacking your chart and learning more. Where if someone were to tell you everything about yourself all at once, like there could be, hundreds of like insightful, impactful, like little nuggets in that reading, but you might not be able to absorb anything but like a couple of them if you were to do it that way, where the community container, like we're all looking at each other's charts, we're all talking, we're having these conversations, that you are able to like absorb and integrate the information about yourself and your chart like slowly over time, which is really beautiful to have the like long spacious containers. So I mean, I'm so excited that it's a year-long course for the new. So I mean, our course was 7 months, and that sounded really long signing up for it, and it was just gone like so quickly. So I'm really excited for the longer course.
Yeah, I think that the like what you were saying about the slow drip in community, it really speaks to how Britton and Jonathan have such a way of holding all of us in that. Maybe it's all that March 4th Pisces, but then that there is like both of you with the earth that you have that is just like, and I got this, it really reins it in. But there's something about how doing it more slowly, there's just more time for integration. And I don't know, I always think of how I think both of you will do this, but I'm imagining Britton, that is just kind of like, do you feel complete? Like, do we feel complete right now? Like, are we okay to proceed? And it's like a very simple, can we wrap this up? But it never comes off like, all right, let's move on. Because sometimes, we might think like, oh shoot, we got to get out of here. But I never feel like when we're in a space of being vulnerable and really sharing things that might be really sensitive, or might be like, oh gosh, I'm feeling very exposed. Also, Scorpio in my 7th house. So 7th house stuff is huge in this. But like, we never, if you choose to open up in these spaces, there's never, like, you're never gonna just be like left hanging. That's never been my experience. And it's very, it's like safe to be vulnerable with all of you guys, and it's definitely changed my life. So there's so much I could say about that, but I'll just cry about it privately instead.
Mary, I love that. And I think it's also bringing to me this idea of, yes, Britton and I facilitate the space, but I'm almost seeing that our role is to facilitate a space so that people can hold each other. And there's something so powerful about the group dynamics, the way that folks are showing up for each other, that also begin to emerge, I think, in these types of containers. And yeah, it's really interesting, and it feels like a very I don't know if all of you had the experience of receiving the communal chart reading, but I always find that when I receive a chart reading or someone talking about my chart, but it's more than just one person, and rather it's a community, it's like, I don't know, it's like the sense of like being held, Like there's just kind of this invisible arm and being seen without feeling super exposed.
Yeah, I feel like part of really what you and Britton are doing is just constellating the people to the container. And I mean, obviously you do a lot more than that with the class, but really part of the magic is the people that join are just, the most incredible people. And it's always like such a safe space to share and be vulnerable. And I think, I'm a Scorpio moon, so that really means something whenever I say that, that it's a safe space. My Scorpio moon in my 3rd house. So it's really important to me to feel the integrity in the community spaces that I join, especially with like Chiron in my 11th house of community. So, I totally understand like community spaces can be terrifying. But if you let yourself be seen and like be open, the just like the gifts that you can receive back are just like absolutely incredible.
And it does feel like a natural progression of Magician's Table to then some of us who went from that into charting your course. And then it was kind of like, oh, wait, let's loop into Magician's Table again for some of us, or for the first time for some of us. But it says so much about once the ball kind of got rolling with like, this is the vibe of being in these containers and like the people who really show up. You're like, why would I want to go somewhere else? I already know what I have here, and I would not give that up.
I just wanted to say something about the holding aspect. I do think that the earthiness that Jonathan and Britton bring to the container. I believe, Jonathan, you're a Virgo.
I'm a Virgo rising.
Virgo sun. Virgo rising. That's right. No, you're a Pisces sun. That's it, of course. But you're Virgo rising, and then Britain's Capricorn moon just makes this beautiful kind of like connection. And it does feel like there is a ground there, but it's not a hard surface. It's a soft, receptive ground for the work that's getting done. And one memory I have about charting your course that sort of illustrates that is that there were 3 of us who were Leo risings in that container. And all 3 of us, I think we kind of considered ourselves like either reluctant Leo risings or confused Leo risings. I mean, we spent much of that, or at least the 3 of us did. We spent a lot of time in the Slack chat, kind of like talking about like, oh my gosh, what does this even mean? And how, and what ways am I a Leo rising? None of this makes sense. None of the archetypes are working. And one of the archetypes that I think we were initially invited to think about was the performer. And then none of us could kind of like identify with it. You know, we were sort of like, we're not performers. None of us have any kind of like theater history or, you know, but we were being perhaps rather narrow in our thinking about that. And at one point, Britton offered like, well, if the performer isn't resonating, then what about the campfire or the bonfire? And I just remember thinking, absolutely, like that's, you know, where I began to feel like, okay, let's start there with that archetype and start meditating on or thinking about what do campfires have to offer, right? They're obviously a space of community, and they are a space where people can have food and, you know, enjoy themselves, have conversations, tell stories. All of that just kind of like resonated with me and really helped me kind of like figure out what was the sort of Leo rising, or what kind of a Leo rising I might be. And so I just found that really valuable. But the fact that there were 2 other reluctant Leo risings, I'll just call them that. And Amy, you can tell me if that's not a great term for it. But I think we, you know, it was that offering that Britton, you know, sort of presented to us. But it was also the conversations we have with each other outside of the regular charting your course meetups, right? That we could have these ongoing conversations about, well, I'm learning this about that, or I'm, you know, and that was really helpful. And again, it was sort of like community building and a communal or collective working out of what this particular placement might mean for us. I don't know if you have anything else to say about that, Amy, since I brought you in, but.
I still do think a lot about it, but since I've started working with Sekhmet, the Egyptian goddess, and that's been incredibly helpful. Her duality, and that's been what's been the most helpful for me.
And Sekhmet is a sun goddess, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's
with the lion's head.
Yeah, with the lion. She's about lioness, and she's a I think the word is pyrokinesis. Yeah. So fire, and it's been pretty amazing. I got a book, John. I can recommend it.
Oh, absolutely. Because I haven't explored Sekhmet.
It's been kind of amazing, but
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking to something that can be really disillusioning and distancing with this when you're learning astrology. And it's like what you're reading about your placements is not connecting in your body. Like it's just not resonating. Like, but I don't get that for myself. And then it can feel almost like your chart's abandoning you, or like astrology's abandoning you. Like all these other people are having these amazing awakenings. And like it is a process. And you might even be able to speak here to like how you held yourself through maybe feeling like some people maybe were connecting to placements faster than you wanted it to happen, but also how you found through community the support to just pause for it, like wait for it. It just the right symbolism or the right connections like are coming. It's just not here yet. And just let the slow drip do the magic that it does. Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of something that Mallory said to me. I love that we're calling in our other friends who aren't here too, because this is very how we are. Because Mallory, so I have a 9th house stellium with Capricorn, so much of it. And I remember when at some point she looked at it and was saying how when I see that, I just see you have so much power. And I was just like, I don't feel like that, you know? And at the time I was just like, I am weak. I have no skills. I can't do anything, you know? And then now I see that more. And part of it is having another person reflect that. And sometimes power can feel like, as that term, it just feels like weighty and responsibility. Weighty responsibility. And then to like eventually get to a point of finding another way to look at it. And like Jacqueline was saying about compassion earlier, it's just like the ways that we can have compassion for the stuff that mostly just looks difficult or hard, and then come to a place of being like, yeah, I do have power, you know? And that like now we're in this 9th house perfected year for me, and a couple other 1990 people in this here group, Jacqueline and Jonathan.
In 1978 too, let me add, yes. 12 years distance.
Yes. Exactly. And so then that's another perfect example of like, okay, so for me it's Capricorn, but for you guys it's something else. And that's just a really fun thing to check in on. And yeah, it's just a beautiful way of learning about yourself through other people's eyes.
And also it fosters this sense of like just trusting the process, you know, just one foot in front of the other, you know, like I'm very impatient. You know, I'm like, I need it all and I need it all right now. And that's it, you know, like, and it has to come exactly what I want, you know, the way I want it. And, you know, over time, it's like, it just kind of, the more you identify with other people and what they're saying and how they're experiencing it and learn the material or don't learn the material, this is also an option, you know, like all the things. And the process unfolds, you know, beautifully, just as it's meant to, you know, and it's hard to find places like that.
I just have to say, Mary, that when I think of you and your Capricorn stellium, which we had some really terrific conversations about during charting your course, I think your chart came up multiple times and we'd all look at it. And every time we'd look at it, there would be this collective gasp, like, you know, and, but what was, you know, but I remember there was one time that your chart was up, we were talking about it. Do you remember this exit, this amazing kind of like mic drop exit? It was
I might need a Capricorn exit right now. I was like, oh God.
Right. Well, it was just so funny because I think you had another appointment and we were having a conversation. Maybe we were going long. And And, you know, everyone's into the conversation. We're all kind of like into Mary's chart. We're like working through what this placement means. And you left. It was just great. You left the meeting. I hope it's okay I'm telling this.
Oh, absolutely. I'll let you carry on.
So you left, and everyone was just kind of like, we just all burst out laughing all at once because it was the most Capricorn exit ever. It was like, you know, it was no nonsense. It was, I got a thing to do. You people hate, and I need to leave. I need to bounce. And you bounced, and it was just wonderful. And even those little funny moments that was like, it was mainly comic. It was mainly sort of like, you know, just silly. It was informative. It was still instructive. It was kind of like, now we got to see what a Capricorn exit looks like. My favorite.
I had so many text messages. I can't remember where I had to go, but it was like immediately afterward that there were just all of these, like, somebody was texting me like, damn, that was, how did she say that? Like, that was something like impressive or so, yeah, it was hilarious. It was, I almost wish I could have stayed to see how people responded. I guess I can go back to the recording, which is another part of this. It was, you can always go back to the recording even now.
True. True.
Oh my gosh, y'all, I forgot about the Capricorn exit. Oh, Mary. Oh, yeah, I love John's point that it was comical and instructive.
Here for it any time, which this seems like a perfect time to leave. Are you guys trying to tell me to get out of here?
Oh goodness. Yeah, we had some really great inside jokes that grew from giggling about various, even very serious things. Yes.
Bone ups.
Yes, when I called our bonus meetup a bone up, that took off.
I think it also speaks to, these are my real friends, because prior to these classes, really, taking a class online feels very dry and like detached, but you are my real life, all of you, every last one, even though I've barely squeezed any of your cheeks in real life.
Oh.
I'm curious to hear too if anyone felt any trepidation with regards to community. I don't know if that was something that was alive in this group, but yeah, what was your process with that?
I remember maybe feeling a little bit of trepidation, partly because of the commitment, you know, just the time commitment, the financial commitment, which was totally worth it. But the investment, I'll say, I know that's a word that Britain's been working with a lot recently, but I felt a little bit of a trepidation about it. I was completely confident I could do all the homework, which actually I ended up not being able to complete all of it during the course. Again, the recordings are so great. The materials are available to folks afterwards, so you can always go back and kind of catch up on the lesson you missed or the piece of the lesson you missed. But I will say this, that like that first day, our first kind of like welcome to the container meeting was so comfortable for me. It just really felt like immediately for me, it felt like home. And so whatever trepidation I had going into the course, sort of leading up to the course, was immediately dispelled. So I won't say I didn't have trepidation, but boy, it went away fast. And I didn't experience it through the course, unless it was in some kind of way in which I was beating myself up. And I was constantly encouraged not to do that by my fellow participants and by Jonathan and Britton, who were holding and guiding us through the process. So that was my experience with trepidation. I didn't have much.
I'll share that. So I think, I always have trepidation because of Chiron and Cancer in the 11th house, which is your house of community. So like any community space, even the ones that I host, are scary for me. Like I always have trepidation joining a group. Like group speaking is scary for me. This is group speaking. Like so I always have trepidation. And so I didn't have like total newcomer trepidation of like not knowing anyone or like how the course is going to go, because of course I've done, you know, several courses with Britton and Jonathan and people that were in the course. Like I knew people. So it's kind of like, you know, you got to see your friends. You're like school's back in session. You got to see your friends. Like it's exciting. I'm such a Virgo rising. Got my new notebook for my charting your course notes. Like, yes, 100%. So in that sense, like, no, it's very exciting to like start the course. But also it is scary to be in community, and like the vulnerability aspect is a huge part of it. Like you don't have to share anything if you don't want to. You don't even have to join the live meetups. Like you could still get a ton of great content from doing the lessons and all the resources, and even like the Slack space if you're comfortable. But I think just kind of like accepting that you're going to be together for such a long period of time, and the content that you're talking about is truly like deep self-exploration. So it's like just kind of accepting that you're all going to be best friends, instead of waiting till you're like a couple months in. Like just, you know, act that way from the start. And I think too, like the sharing your observations is a big part of our meetups. And I would say it's like pretty low stakes, like sharing, where you can get comfortable kind of like sharing what you observe about the chart of the moment, other people's placements, how things went for you. Where like if learning astrology alone, like in your room, is the low stakes, like, you know, possible way to share. And then maybe like your real life friends charts who you can like, this is what I learned your Mercury sign is about. Then the group container is like one step up above that, because everyone is learning together. The people that quote unquote know more than you want to see you succeed. So like they want to share. If people have questions about placements, like everyone wants to share. Everyone wants to be helpful. And like it is just such a deep sense of community, like right off the bat, from spending time with everyone.
I'm curious to hear if any of you would like to share about what you've learned about being with yourself and also being a self within a community and a collective since charting your course. I'm really talking specifically about like since we ended, in what ways do you feel like, in what ways do you feel like some of these ways of being in community that we had practiced together in charting your course poured into other areas of your life, if any?
I'll say for me, it gave me, you know, an increased sense of connection, like I said, you know, and gave me a lot of willingness to lean into challenging circumstances, because I knew, you know, that I was held by that connection, you know, for whatever it was worth. On the very like heady level, you know, on the other side of it, it gave me a lot of confidence to be vulnerable in community situations, because, you know, obviously it was an incredibly safe positioning, but also that like, I just felt safe, you know, pushing my comfort zone with that trepidation because I had done it once. Right. And so like, I was able to do it again. And on the flip side of it, I was able to witness so many people helping each other, you know, kind of that service mentality exhibited in very live circumstances that, and because that energy is so palpable, you know, through the Zoom screens and Slack spaces and any of that, that it's hard not to be inspired to take that mindset, you know, on a more embodied level. And so for me, it was like, it just was never a choice afterwards to like use astrology in that type of way. Whereas I had been, before I came to the container, I felt like very nervous about it.
For me, something that was a really unexpected result of being in charting your course was how comfortable I became doing readings for people without needing preparation in advance. And I had very clear data on this because I did Magician's Table the first time Britton offered it. And in Magician's Table, you do readings for everyone in your group. And, you know, I have the knowing, like the knowledge part of astrology down, but the intuitive side of it that's also so important is something that I wasn't as comfortable with. And then going into charting your course, really without even consciously working on it, just meeting with the groups and talking about astrology, hearing other people talk about it, being able to have these like real life conversations with people who have the shared language of astrology instead of like in real life. Like my friends are interested, but they don't really know about it. It's more me talking at them. So being in the community like space of a shared conversation where you're like bouncing astrology ideas off of one another and talking about different chart placements and everything. And then going into the second iteration of the Magician's Table and doing readings and just being so incredibly comfortable doing readings and other than some like basic preparation, like not feeling like I need to like pour over every astrology resource I have, not having to be super prepared, like just letting it be a natural conversation that flows between us. That was just such a gift. And it was not something that I even considered going into the charting your course space as like an outcome of it. And it's not even something, if you had asked me like the day after we closed charting your course, you know, if I had filled out a questionnaire, I don't think I would have known that that was an outcome of being in the group. And yeah, so that has just been like such a blessing to just have this really like deep comfort, like not saying I know everything. And even, yeah, like there's still basic astrology things where I'm like, I just choose to like not really have a grasp on that. And that's fine. Like, but just being able to have the comfort to talk about it, or maybe kind of like, you know, muse on a placement and be curious about it instead of having to know the answer, which I think is something that maybe a Virgo rising struggles with, but that has been like really fun. Yeah. To get like to see astrology as something we can be curious about instead of something that we have to, you know, claim myself an astrologer and I have to know everything. Like you don't have to know everything. And yeah, so that's been really fun exploring that.
Also, such a great metaphor for life, right, Jacqueline? Because how we approach astrology as Virgo rising is very much how we approach life too. Like, I have to know everything.
Yeah, it's right. The saying is like how we approach anything is how we do everything. And yeah, so I think astrology just like is a really great workout for our curious mind to like tap into our Gemini and like let it be fun and playful.
I saw Mary was unmuting, and but I'll try and be quick about this. And I'm going to share some personal information. I'm going to get vulnerable here because I felt like it was a wonderful opportunity for me to get vulnerable during charting your course. allow the tears to flow, share the hard moments, ponder over the so-called hard placements. During charting your course, it was becoming increasingly clear to me that I had a problem with drugs and alcohol that had increased and spiked during the pandemic. And I don't remember, I may have mentioned it once or twice, like during charting your course, but I really wasn't sort of like in a place where I could kind of like say, okay, this is an issue and it's an issue I need to address. But what was lovely about the charting your course was the opportunity for me to really look at like the grand trine of my water signs and what was going on in those. I have Cancer in the 12th. I've got Pisces in the 8th. I've got Scorpio in the 4th. I have Neptune conjunct the South Node in the 4th. I've got Mercury and Venus in the 12th. I've got Chiron at 29 degrees in Pisces in the 8th. Those were all placements where I could begin to really kind of get curious about like, how do these contribute to what I'll just call sort of like my desire to escape or to numb or to to sort of leave the present existence and find some solace in something else. And it wasn't long after that I ended up going into rehab and then going into an outpatient program and all of this. And some of you know this saga, and I'm not going to get too deep into it, but I do want to just mention one moment when it comes to community is that while I was in rehab, it was during most of the month of May, and the full moon eclipse in Scorpio was occurring. And so I kept telling everybody, like, I'm so excited, we're going to have an eclipse tonight. We're going to have, and everyone was talking about how ominous this particular full moon lunation was. But, I was kind of looking forward to it because of where I have Scorpio and what's going on in Scorpio in my chart. And I got all these other patients to come out with me on this little ratty patio that had almost no space. And we could never leave this place. So that was really the only outdoor opportunity we had. And we had to wait quite a while for this moon to kind of like finally get over the building that we were in, this big wall that was sort of in front of us, and finally emerge. And when it did, I had all these people around me and they were asking questions about like, oh, well, what's, what causes an eclipse? And so, I'm not an astronomer, but I could explain just a little bit about that. And they all found it beautiful. That's the important thing. They all found it either stunning or beautiful or remarkable. And I just loved being in a place where, the folks who were there, we all shared a common problem, even if we didn't share anything else. And we had this moment where we could share admiring the moon and just kind of like thinking about it. And if nothing else, it was just kind of like, oh, wow, look at this moon. It's red. It's different. And so that's just a concrete example of where I feel like, through my recovery process and my absolute and utter need for community in that process, couples so nicely and was completely supported by my experiences with community in charting your course and other containers. So I hope that's okay that I shared that, but that's my thought about community and community care and how astrology can kind of facilitate that, the social lubricant that Jonathan was talking about.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
I feel like once I started like studying astrology with you guys, I like my thirst for knowledge just grew and grew and grew from there. I have a few books on the Kabbalah now, and it's just branching out now. So I thank you for that, because I don't think that I would have even started looking into it from there. I mean, maybe the Kabbalah because of human design, but definitely I think it came from the Magician's Table as well, because I think the connection to magic as came from that also. So I think that being in community and learning about astrology has opened my the portal of my mind to all these other things. And I see also the like when I'm out and about, like even in Boulder, like you hear people using the language of astrology in like some places, and I'm like, oh, this person knows some things. So like you can see it in some places, and I'm like, oh, she knows, this person knows some things, like we're part of the same family, you know. That's how it feels to me. Like it's a family. I feel like you guys are my chosen family. And I kind of feel like the planets are part of the community too. Like that's what it feels like to me. I did not feel like that in the beginning. I feel like I wanted it to be like they're these guys, this esoteric thing, but now I feel like we're all in it together, you know. I'm not sure when I started feeling like that, but it does feel like that now to me. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Amy.
I think that's such a good point, Amy, because being in community, it's like you can also see other people modeling, you know, how they interact with the planets and what astrology is to them, and like how it's kind of changed their like every day-to-day life. And like in our group, one of our group members said like, oh, I want what she's having. And that was like so impactful to me, because like, yeah, like I want to interact with Jupiter the way that like that person does, or like I want a personal relationship to Mars. And then I think, you know, the planets are like, they want to work for us, and like they're listening. So it's like, even just saying like, I want to work with you. And then they're like, okay, let's do it. And then these pathways open for us that, you know, we maybe couldn't have even seen if we were just trying to like learn astrology on our own.
Yeah, the surprise factor is big time. You know, it is like
yeah, something that I was going to say along with modeling, Jacqueline, is just that there's so much space for trusting what resonates and not feeling like if something doesn't click that there's anything wrong with you. It's just like, okay, maybe that's just not for you to worry about right now. Maybe something else is lighting up, and that's okay. And that, yeah, like we will get to it or we won't. And that's just not what we're here to learn. That's fine too. There's so much space for it just being like exactly right as it is. And yeah, that's so special about all of this whole group.
Thank you all. This has been so wonderful. Any of you have any last words that you want to share as we wind to a close?
I feel complete.
Yeah. Thank you, Bridget.
I'll just say that charting your course is such a beautiful foundation, not just for your future studies of astrology or whatever other modalities you might choose to explore, whether those are energy readings, tarot, working with crystals, whatever it might be. But it is such a beautiful foundation it serves as a turning point, really. So, you know, it can serve as a turning point where you can kind of pivot. And if you want, this can be a moment where you can turn a different direction, right? Or explore a new path and do something else that's going to start meeting needs that you either didn't know you had or that you've known you had, but now you have more tools to use to try and meet those needs.
Thank you. We really feel that, Jonathan and I, that we actually see and feel the compost of charting your course as like the soil and as the parts that are forming the new being, you know, that is astrology as praxis. And like, that means you're really part of that energy because you are part of that compost. And what we created together was so special. So thank you. It's like still living is how I see it. Yeah, that closing class was a closer like I've never experienced. That was so powerful. And thank you so much for trusting. And then we're speaking to everyone listening or not listening who is part of our container. It was a wondrous experience of being connected with the planets through each other. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It has been such a pleasure to have a little reunion with all of you, and thank you for making me and Britton part of your astrological journey. It's just been such a joy. All right, that's it for my conversation with the participants of Charting Your Course in 2021. I hope that you really enjoyed this episode. I hope that you enjoyed hearing different perspectives other than mine and Britton's. And I hope that regardless of whether you are interested in astrology as praxis or not, that you take away some really interesting tidbits of information about this beautiful experience of learning astrology within a community. I too learn astrology within various learning containers with different communities, and honestly, some of those experiences have been some of the most magical experiences in my life. And I think astrology is such a powerful tool to have in terms of our community building skills. Because astrology to me really invites in curiosity, and astrology brings in questions way more than they bring in answers. So if you find that you are interested in learning astrology with me and Britton, and to be a part of a new group that is forming around astrology as praxis, come check out the course page. It is in our show notes here below. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I would love to hear from you. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, if you enjoy this conversation, I would love to receive 5 stars or reviews, especially if you are an Apple Podcast listener. I would really appreciate a few lines of reviews. They don't have to be super long. 3-4 sentences are definitely enough. And yeah, it really fills my heart with such joy to see people enjoying these conversations. So until next time, I wish you well, and I'm sending you so much love. Take care.